Hello everyone, Randy Rhoads, the dazzling guitarist whose electrifying talent changed the very language of rock guitar, remains one of the greatest what-if stories in music history. And though the brilliance of his brief life continues to shine through his recordings and influence, the mystery surrounding his death has haunted fans for more than 4 decades. Because while official reports labeled the crash that killed him in 1982 as a tragic accident caused by reckless flying, the deeper story of how a cautious, disciplined, classically trained musician ended up on a reckless stunt flight in the first place is where the real mystery lies. And as more details have surfaced over the years, pieced together from witness accounts, accident reports, and testimonies from bandmates, the truth is finally becoming clearer. Though it isn't comforting, it reveals a tragedy born out of negligence, poor decisions, and the chaotic, often lawless environment that surrounded rock and roll touring in the early 1980s. To understand why Randy's death remains so shocking, one must first understand who he was, because unlike many of his peers in the heavy metal scene, Randy wasn't driven by excess or a desire for the spotlight. He was the son of music teachers in California who began playing guitar at the age of 6, steeped in classical influences, and by his teenage years was already developing a unique style that blended the precision of classical composition with the raw power of hard rock. And when he formed Quiet Riot in the mid-1970s, his reputation as a gifted young guitarist spread quickly across Los Angeles, though mainstream fame eluded him until fate brought him into the orbit of Ozzy Osbourne, who had just been fired from Black Sabbath and was assembling a new band in hopes of salvaging his career. Ozzy later recounted how Randy's audition lasted only a few minutes because his talent was so overwhelming that he knew instantly he had found the guitarist who would redefine his sound, and together with bassist Bob Daisley and drummer Lee Kerslake, they crafted the groundbreaking albums Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, records that not only revived Ozzy's career but also cemented Randy as one of the most innovative guitarists of all time, creating riffs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley that still inspire awe today. But behind the curtain of success, Randy was growing weary of the rock and roll circus. Ozzy was unpredictable, often drunk or high, the touring schedule was grueling, and the culture around the band was drenched in chaos. Yet Randy, unlike many around him, remained grounded, often studying music theory on the bus, talking about his dream of earning a degree in classical guitar, and expressing to friends that he wanted to eventually leave the road to teach music, a fact that makes the circumstances of his death all the more chilling, because Randy wasn't the type to embrace reckless thrills. And yet on March 19th, 1982, he found himself boarding a small Beechcraft Bonanza plane piloted by Andrew Aycock, the band's tour bus driver, whose license had reportedly been suspended, whose history included troubling behavior, and whose decision to buzz the tour bus in reckless low passes ultimately ended 3 lives. The story of that morning has been told and retold, but the details continue to disturb. After a long night of travel, the band's bus stopped at a small airfield in Leesburg, Florida, owned by country musician Jerry Calhoun, and while most of the crew slept inside the bus, Aycock convinced keyboardist Don Airey and others to join him for short flights, supposedly as harmless fun. But the fun turned dangerous when Aycock began flying dangerously low over the bus, reportedly to scare those inside. Randy was eventually coaxed onto one of the flights, along with Rachel Youngblood, the band's seamstress and Aycock's ex-wife. And while some accounts suggest Randy went reluctantly, perhaps hoping to calm Aycock down, others believe he may have been pressured or simply caught up in the moment. Yet what's consistent is that Randy wasn't a thrill-seeker. He was known to fear flying and disliked risk, which makes his presence on that plane one of the enduring mysteries. As the plane made repeated passes, one of the wings clipped the band's tour bus, sending the aircraft into a house and killing everyone on board instantly. And while Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne later described waking up to the horrific explosion and realizing their friend and musical partner was left many fans unsatisfied because they focused only on Aycock's reckless flying without addressing the larger questions. Why was he allowed near the plane? Why didn't anyone step in to stop him? And why did Randy agree to take part in what was clearly a dangerous stunt? Some band members suggested fatigue, chaos, and a lack of authority on the road contributed to the disaster. Others pointed to the culture of the time, where rock tours were often lawless zones with little oversight, and still others whispered that Randy had been trying to get away from the negativity on the bus, and simply made a tragic mistake. But regardless of the exact reasoning, the outcome was the same. One of music's brightest talents was lost at just 25, leaving behind a grieving family, devastated fans, and a legacy that would only grow larger in his absence. The aftermath was equally troubling, as Sharon and Ozzy found themselves defending Randy's memory while navigating their own controversies, and the crash investigation never fully satisfied those who believed more accountability was needed. But as the years passed, Randy's legend grew, with countless guitarists citing him as their greatest influence, tributes pouring in annually, and his solos studied in music schools around the world. The mystery, then, isn't about whether the plane crashed or how. It's about the unanswered human questions of that day. Why Randy, who was so careful and forward-thinking, ended up in that plane. Why no one stopped Aycock. And whether his death could have been prevented had the adults around him taken more responsibility. And in that sense, the mystery's resolution isn't comforting, because it reveals a truth that is more painful than conspiratorial. Randy's death wasn't fate, it wasn't destiny, it wasn't unavoidable, it was preventable. And it happened because of recklessness, poor judgment, and the negligence of those entrusted with the safety of the band. And while this truth is hard to accept, it's also important because it underscores the fragility of life, the dangers of excess, and the heavy cost of carelessness. And it makes the brilliance of Randy's short career shine even brighter, reminding us that what he achieved in only a few years is more than most achieve in a lifetime, and that though the mystery of his final day may now feel solved, the power of his music ensures that his spirit is immortal, living on in every note of Crazy Train, every aspiring guitarist who studies his licks, and every fan who still feels the heartbreak of a star who was taken far too soon. Thanks for watching.